The jet hummed with the low vibration of engines, steady and soothing, like a heartbeat beneath the polished leather and hushed conversations of first class. Crystal glasses chimed softly as attendants moved with quiet grace, topping off champagne, offering hot towels, ensuring comfort at 30,000 feet. It was a picture of refinement, of power, of exclusivity, until his voice cut through the air. You don't belong here. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was sharp, the kind of blade that slices clean, without raising its tone. A man in his late 50s, gray suit tailored perfection, leaned across the aisle. His lips curled into a sneer as his eyes locked onto the black woman, seated by the window. She turned her head slowly, her expression unreadable, as if weighing the words before letting them reach her. Her posture remained composed, her hands resting lightly on the armrest, nails polished, a single gold watch catching the cabin lights. She didn't flinch, didn't react. And that silence, that unbothered composure, seemed to enrage him more than any retort could have. I asked you a question, he pressed louder now. How exactly did you get this seat? Someone give you an upgrade? Or did you just slip past the gate hoping no one would notice? The rows of passengers shifted uncomfortably. Conversations died. Phones stilled mid-scroll. The insult wasn't just personal. It was public. He had made sure of that. The woman's eyes moved, finally landing on him. Not sharp, not soft, steady. She didn't open her mouth. She didn't need to. Her silence was heavier than words. The man chuckled, a dry, ugly sound. Oh, don't look at me like that. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. People like you don't just end up here. Not unless something's been bent or broken. He turned deliberately toward the flight attendant who was standing 2 rows back, frozen in indecision. Go on, check her ticket. Make sure she actually belongs on this jet. The attendant hesitated, glancing between them. Her lips parted as if to object, then closed. Protocol pressed against conscience. And in that hesitation, the damage was done. The passenger's smirk widened. He had the stage. See? Even they aren't sure, he said, his voice rising. Wouldn't be the first time someone snuck their way into first class. Happens all the time. Scammers. Pretenders. Thinking they can sit where they haven't earned the right to. A whisper rippled through the cabin. Someone coughed awkwardly. Another man cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. But no one spoke up. Not yet. The woman's gaze shifted from the man to the attendant, and for the first time, she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her handbag and pulled out her boarding pass. She held it between 2 fingers, the paper crisp, the seat number printed clearly. 1A, first class. Window. The attendant stepped forward, took the pass, scanned it with the practiced eye of someone who had done this thousands of times. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Yes, sir, she said softly. This is her assigned seat. The answer should have ended it. But the man only laughed, shaking his head. Assigned seat. He leaned back, spreading his arms as if he were explaining the obvious to children. Oh, I don't doubt it says that. But let's be real. Those things can be printed, forged. Hell, half the time the gate agents don't even look. I'm telling you, someone slipped this woman a ticket. That doesn't belong to her. Look at her. Do you really think she can afford a seat like this? Gasps broke the uneasy quiet. The words hung in the air like poison. The woman's jaw tightened just slightly, but her eyes, those eyes, remained calm. The attendant looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Her voice faltered as she tried again, this time louder. Sir, she is in the correct seat. Please lower your voice. The man slammed his palm against his armrest, the sharp crack startling several passengers. Don't tell me to lower my voice. This is theft, fraud, whatever you want to call it. And I won't sit here while you people cover for her. His choice of words, you people, landed like a grenade. A woman in a row behind stiffened visibly. A man in the front shook his head, muttering under his breath. But still, no one stepped in. The black woman finally moved again. She turned fully now, her body angled toward him. When she spoke, her voice was measured, even. You've said enough. The man blinked. Her voice wasn't loud. but it carried weight, the kind that made the air vibrate differently. A few heads turned, as if suddenly curious who she might be. He scoffed, but there was a faintest crack in his armor now. "Oh, I've said enough, have I?" "No, lady, not nearly enough. People like you think you can just waltz into spaces you don't belong in. Think money or favors, or some handout puts you on the same level as the rest of us. But let me make this clear. The words that came next were uglier, the kind that made even those who had been silent before shift uncomfortably in their seats. Venom poured from his mouth, each syllable echoing in the pressurized silence of the cabin. The woman didn't rise to meet his rage. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as though observing him like one might study an insect thrashing in a jar. And then she smiled, just faintly. It was the smallest gesture, but it landed harder than any insult he had hurled. The smirk slid off his face, replaced by something he couldn't name: irritation, unease, maybe even fear. For the first time, the balance in the cabin shifted. The attendant cleared her throat. "Sir, I need to ask you to calm down, or I will have to report this behavior to the captain." The man's jaw clenched, but his voice faltered. "Go ahead," he spat. "Report me. You'll see. You'll all see who's really out of place here." The woman leaned back into her seat, eyes fixed on him, her silence once again the loudest sound in the room. The engines droned on, steady as ever, but the cabin had transformed into a stage, every passenger an unwilling audience to a scene that was only beginning to unfold. And somewhere deep in that silence, though the man didn't yet realize it, his fate was already sealed. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The champagne flutes on silver trays no longer clinked. The hum of engines was steady as ever, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere had warped into something brittle, fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Every passenger felt it, though most pretended not to. The entitled man leaned back in his seat, smugness settling across his face like a second skin. He had made his accusation loudly enough, cruelly enough, that the silence of others worked in his favor. Silence, after all, can sound like agreement. The flight attendant still held the woman's boarding pass in trembling hands, staring at it as though the paper itself were dangerous. She knew the truth. The seat was legitimate. The pass was real. But the man's voice had carried such authority, such practiced disdain, that doubt crept into her anyway, worming its way past professionalism and training. "Ma'am," she said finally, too softly, "do you mind if I just double-check with the manifest?" It was a small betrayal, but in the quiet of first class, it was deafening. The woman turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto the attendants. She didn't lash out. She didn't plead. Her expression remained composed, regal even, but her silence in that moment was a mirror, forcing the attendant to see what she was doing, siding, however subtly, with the aggressor. The man chuckled under his breath. "See? Even she knows something's off. Can't be too careful these days. People will try anything for a free ride." The words landed heavy. A man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie. A woman 2 rows back lowered her phone, though she hadn't stopped recording. Everyone knew what they were witnessing wasn't right. But knowing and acting are different things, and fear of confrontation kept them rooted in their silence. The attendant nodded quickly, almost apologetically, and hurried toward the front galley. The boarding pass still trembled in her hand. The aggressor leaned forward, resting his elbow on his knee, his grin widening. "You could make this easier, you know. Admit it. Say the truth. That seat isn't yours. No shame in it. You can't buy class. You can't buy your way into places you don't belong." The woman's only response was to lift her champagne glass. She swirled the golden liquid gently, her wrist delicate, her face calm. She sipped once, placed it back on the armrest, and returned her gaze to the window. Her quiet refusal to play his game only fueled him further. His voice rose. "Look at that. Not even a word. Can't even defend herself. That's what happens when you get caught. Nothing left to say." A murmur stirred in the cabin. A younger passenger, early 30s, headphones slung around his neck, leaned forward slightly. He opened his mouth, then stopped, glancing nervously at the crew. If they weren't stepping in decisively, What right did he have? The flight attendant returned, her face pale, her posture stiff. "Sir, ma'am," she said carefully, "the manifest confirms she is indeed seated correctly in 1A. Everything is in order." For a heartbeat, the aggressor's smile faltered. But then he laughed, loud and dismissive. "Of course it says that. These things can be manipulated. You think I haven't seen it before? I've flown more hours in this seat than most people spend in their offices. I know how this works." The attendant swallowed, torn between correcting him and retreating. She chose retreat. "Sir, please lower your voice. Other passengers are uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. He barked the word, throwing it back at her. They should be uncomfortable. Fraud is uncomfortable. Theft is uncomfortable. Watching this woman take a seat she hasn't earned, that's uncomfortable. The woman's hand twitched once against the armrest, but she did not look at him. She sat as though sculpted from marble, still and unyielding. A second attendant, older and steadier, approached quietly. His tone was firmer, but his words still revealed the slant of caution. "Sir, that's enough. The passenger is in her proper seat. Let's leave it at that." The aggressor's grin returned, sly and knowing. "Leave it at that? No, I won't. I've seen this too many times. And I'll be damned if I sit here quietly while the rest of you ignore it. People like her," he paused, his voice dripping venom on those words. "Always pulling strings. Always playing the system. Always expecting handouts." The older attendant stiffened, as though he'd been struck. He wanted to object, but his professionalism chained him down. He offered no defense. The aggressor spread his arms wide, turning his performance into theater. "Look around. Does she look like she belongs in this cabin? Dressed like that? Sitting there pretending she fits in? It's laughable. Go on, ask yourselves. Ask if you've ever seen someone like her in a seat like this without some scheme behind it." Every passenger could feel the bile in his words, but no one spoke. Not yet. Phones stayed half-hidden, recording the unfolding ugliness without interrupting it. The silence of the cabin was complicit, each heartbeat an admission that fear outweighed conscience. Finally, the woman moved again. She placed both hands deliberately on the armrests and turned her head, her gaze slicing through the air until it landed squarely on him. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but steady enough to shake the air. "You should stop." The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to hush for her words. The man laughed, but there was a hitch in it now. "Stop? No. You don't get to tell me to stop. You don't get to order people around like you're in charge of anything. You think sitting in that seat makes you somebody." He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "You're nobody. Nothing." The words were sharp, cruel, meant to cut. And yet the woman didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned back, her expression unreadable, her silence heavier than any insult he could conjure. The younger passenger with the headphones shifted again, this time speaking under his breath, just loud enough for the row behind him to hear. "This isn't right." His voice trembled with conviction, but he didn't stand. He didn't raise it louder. "Not yet." The aggressor reclined smugly once more, mistaking the silence for victory. "That's what I thought," he muttered, but the air had changed. The woman's silence was no longer submission. It was strategy, and though the man couldn't see it yet, the cabin had begun to turn. Whispers spread. Phones kept recording, and an invisible tide was shifting against him. The attendants exchanged glances, uneasy. They had tried to appease him, to keep the peace. But peace had been shattered already, and now the question hung heavy in the recycled air. When the moment came, whose side would they be on? The woman lifted her glass again, sipped, and set it down. Only then did she speak a second time, her words precise, cutting through the thick silence. "Actions," she said softly, "have consequences." The aggressor scoffed, but his grin faltered. He didn't realize it yet, but his stage was shrinking, and the woman, silent and steady, was waiting for the exact moment to take it from him. The tension had shifted from brittle silence to something volatile, flammable, the kind of atmosphere where one spark could ignite the whole cabin. Every passenger felt it, their eyes darting between the entitled man and the woman by the window. He leaned forward, emboldened by his own echo. You think that little line about consequences scares me? His voice was louder now, brash, meant to dominate. Let me explain something to you. Consequences are what people like me deliver to people like you. That's the way it's always been, and that's the way it'll stay. The words rang with ugly conviction. The woman didn't move. Her stillness was deliberate, unnerving. Her fingers rested lightly on the armrest, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. But her silence was no longer submission. Passengers felt it. It was restraint, coiled like a spring. The man's face reddened as though her composure itself were an insult. He jabbed a finger toward her, his words cutting through the cabin. Don't sit there acting high and mighty. You're a fraud, a pretender, sitting in a seat you didn't earn, pretending you belong among people who've actually built something, worked for something, paid for something. He turned deliberately to the attendants, raising his voice further. Do your damn jobs. Remove her, right now. I don't care what your little manifest says. I'm telling you she doesn't belong here. You want to avoid a lawsuit? You'll get her off this plane before it lands. The younger attendant's throat worked nervously. The older one shook his head slightly, his patience thinning. Sir, you need to stop harassing other passengers. If you continue, we'll have to escalate this. Escalate. The man barked out a laugh. Do you even know who I am? I'll have your jobs before this flight is over. It was a bluff, but his voice carried the weight of someone who had spent his life bluffing and winning. For years, people had moved aside when he barked. Why would today be different? The woman finally turned, her gaze resting on him like a spotlight. Her words were soft, but every syllable landed with precision. Threats are dangerous things to make in front of witnesses. The man faltered, his grin slipping for the briefest second. He covered it quickly with another bark of laughter. Witnesses? Please. Who do you think these people will believe? A respectable man in business class, or some nobody trying to talk her way into legitimacy? He gestured to the passengers, as if they were his jury. But more than one set of eyes dropped away from him, unwilling to meet his. The phone still recording glinted like silent observers, impartial and unblinking. The woman's lips curved faintly, the shadow of a smile. You assume too much. It was the calm in her tone that unsettled him more than anything. He had expected outrage, tears, denial, not this. Not quiet, measured confidence. His voice rose higher, cracking with frustration. Assume? No, I know. I've seen your type before. Always reaching above your station. Always acting like the rules don't apply to you. Well, I make the rules in my world, and in my world you're nothing. The older attendant stiffened. A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin. The young man with the headphones finally muttered louder. This is ridiculous. He didn't look at the aggressor, but his voice carried enough that others heard. The aggressor snapped toward him. What did you say? The young man raised his hand slightly. Just that, you're out of line. She's in her seat. You should let it go. The cabin collectively inhaled. Someone had finally spoken. The aggressor sneered, but his swagger wavered. He wasn't used to resistance. Mind your own business, kid. This doesn't concern you. The young man's voice was steady now, stronger. She's a passenger, just like the rest of us. That makes it everyone's business when you harass her. The aggressor's face flushed crimson. He whipped back toward the woman. You see what you've started? Stirring people up, making a scene. That's what your kind always does. Play the victim, stir the pot, then cry discrimination when someone calls you out. The words landed like acid. The silence afterward was heavier than ever. The woman tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. This time, when she spoke, there was steel beneath the calm. You should be careful. It was a warning, not a plea. The aggressor barked a laugh again, but the sound was strained, hollow. Careful? Of you? Please. You're powerless. Just another loudmouth trying to pretend you matter. But let me make this clear. When this flight lands, I'm going to file a formal complaint. You'll be blacklisted from this airline. You'll never step foot in first class again. A few passengers exchanged looks, uneasy now. The arrogance had shifted from confident to desperate. The ran of the man clinging to control he didn't truly have. The woman reached for her glass once more, sipping slowly, then set it down with deliberate precision. She leaned slightly toward him, her voice low, but clear enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You're right about one thing." The man blinked, thrown by her words. "What's that?" "Consequences." Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "They're coming, and when they arrive, they won't be mine to bear." The cabin held its breath. The aggressor opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. The engines roared steadily beneath them, but in the pressurized silence of the cabin, something had shifted irrevocably. She had given her warning, and though he didn't yet understand it, his stage was about to collapse beneath him. The jet began its descent. The seatbelt sign chimed on with a muted ding, but the cabin wasn't thinking about landing. No one was thinking about smooth arrivals or baggage claims anymore. The entire first-class section was riveted on the ugly theater that had been unfolding row by row, insult by insult. The aggressor leaned back smugly, convinced he had won. "You hear that?" he said, loud enough for everyone. "We're about to land. And the second this plane hits the ground, I'm filing my complaint. You'll be lucky if they let you clean the bathrooms on one of these jets again." His laugh was sharp, grating, bouncing off the leather seats and polished wood. But it cracked when the intercom buzzed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be making a short, unscheduled stop before our final destination. Please remain seated as we coordinate with ground staff. Thank you for your cooperation." Confusion rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances. An unscheduled stop? In the middle of a routine route? That wasn't normal. The aggressor frowned, but quickly twisted it into another smirk. "Hear that? They're stopping for me. About time someone took this circus seriously." The woman by the window didn't move. She sat with the same serene posture she'd maintained since the first insult, her eyes fixed ahead, her calm like armor. The wheels touched down with a jolt. Engines roared in reverse thrust, slowing the jet against the runway. And then, the moment no one expected, the cabin door opened. Security boarded. Not a pair of sleepy airport officers dragging from their break room, but crisp, professional detail in dark uniforms. Their presence was immediate, authoritative. The air changed the second their boots hit the carpet. The aggressor's face lit up with triumph. He pointed at the woman, his voice booming with self-satisfaction. "Right there. That's her. Took you long enough. Fraudulent boarding, harassment, you name it. Go ahead, get her out of my cabin." The lead officer didn't move toward her. Instead, he turned his gaze to him. "Sir, would you please stand?" The words fell like a hammer. The aggressor blinked. His grin faltered. "Excuse me? I think you misunderstood. I'm the one who called for this. She's a problem, not me." The officer didn't blink. "Sir, please stand." A murmur swept through the cabin. Several passengers leaned forward, phones rising a little higher, recording without shame now. The aggressor's voice cracked. "You've got it backwards. I'm a paying customer. I demand you check her papers again. This woman doesn't belong here." The officer's tone didn't shift an inch. "We've already confirmed her credentials. Multiple times. You're the disturbance. Stand up or we'll assist you." The aggressor sputtered, words tumbling out in desperation. "This is outrageous. Do you even know who I am? You'll regret this. My lawyers will eat you alive." And then the woman finally rose. It was the first time since the confrontation began that she moved more than an inch. She stood slowly, deliberately, smoothing her blazer with elegant precision. Her presence filled the cabin, calm, unyielding, undeniable. When she spoke, her voice was steady, resonant, carrying across the stunned silence. "They know exactly who I am." Every head turned. The aggressor's jaw tightened. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" he spat. She met his glare with a gaze that could have frozen fire. "The chief executive officer of this airline." The words hit like a detonation. Gasps broke through the cabin. The younger passenger with the headphones nearly choked. The attendants froze, their faces draining of color. Even the officer straightened subtly, their composure sharpened by the weight of her title. The aggressor's laugh came out shaky, brittle. "CEO? Please, don't make me laugh. That's ridiculous." But his voice wavered. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek leather case. She opened it with quiet precision, revealing an identification card embossed with the airline's golden seal, her photograph, and her name in bold print. Chief Executive Officer. The older attendant, standing a few feet away, gasped audibly. He'd seen the corporate leadership team on training slides. He recognized her now. The aggressor's face drained of blood. The CEO didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You spent this entire flight demeaning me, questioning my right to sit in this seat, demanding my removal. And now here we are, a plane that belongs to my company, a crew that reports to me, an airline where every contract, every policy, every ounce of authority runs through my office." The silence was thunderous. She took one step closer to him, her heels clicking softly against the carpet. "You assumed I was powerless. You assumed you were untouchable. But you forgot one very important truth." The aggressor's lips trembled. What truth?" "That arrogance blinds. And actions," she said, repeating her earlier warning, "always have consequences." The lead officer stepped forward. "Sir, you are under removal order for harassment and disruption of flight operations. Stand now." The man's shoulders slumped. His bravado leaked out of him like air from a punctured balloon. This can't be happening," he muttered, his eyes darting desperately around the cabin. But no one offered him help. Not one passenger. Not one crew member. The phone's recording caught every second of his collapse. Security grasped his arms. He yelped in protest, thrashing weakly, but it was useless. They dragged him down the narrow aisle as the cabin watched, wide-eyed and silent. As they hauled him toward the door, his voice cracked one final time, half plea, half threat. "You'll regret this. You can't do this to me. Do you know who?" The CEO's voice cut across him, quiet but sharp enough to end it. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. And so will the world when this video goes live." Phones lifted higher. Passengers didn't even pretend to hide their recording now. The cabin door closed behind him, leaving only silence in his wake. The sound of the engines filled the void, steady and unbothered, as if nothing had happened at all. The CEO turned back toward the stunned cabin. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed her sleeves, and returned to her seat in 1A. She lifted her glass of champagne once more, sipped, and set it down with the same calm dignity she'd carried since the first insult. Only now, the silence around her wasn't contempt. It was respect. For a long moment after the cabin door sealed shut, there was only silence. Not the silence of fear, nor the silence of complicity, but the kind that follows a thunderclap. Stunned, reverent, heavy with aftershock. The CEO sat in her seat once more, her profile illuminated by the muted cabin lights. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't cursed or raged. She had spoken only when necessary, each word like a measured strike. Now she sipped her champagne, perfectly composed, as though the removal of a screaming passenger by security was as routine as the distribution of hot towels. But to the cabin, nothing about what had just happened was routine. A ripple of whispers began, cautious at first. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed looks, mouths moving and hurried. Hushed disbelief. The younger man with the headphones whispered, "She's really the CEO?" The woman beside him nodded, still gripping her phone, her recording light glowing faintly. The flight attendants moved with strange energy now, caught between shame and relief. They had doubted her. They had hesitated. They had stood inches from siding with the aggressor. And now, here she was, their ultimate superior, their employer, their judge. Every gesture they made was sharper, more deferential. Their eyes avoided hers, but their posture screamed apology. The CEO didn't need apologies. She already had something better. The truth had revealed itself. The engines roared as the jet taxied back into the sky, climbing toward its final destination. Yet in the cabin, the flight felt altered, as if they were no longer passengers on a simple route, but witnesses to something monumental. The young man with the headphones found his courage again. He leaned across the aisle, his voice soft. I just want to say I'm sorry for not speaking sooner. The CO turned her gaze toward him. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she gave a small nod, neither dismissive nor overly gracious, but enough to let him breathe again. Her words were few, but they cut straight to the marrow. Silence has weight. The young man swallowed, nodding quickly. I know. I won't forget. Phones continue to capture her every move. The internet would devour these images within hours. The CO sitting serenely in seat 1A, the champagne glass gleaming faintly in her hand, the dignity of a woman who had endured public humiliation and answered it with quiet authority. By the time the jet touched down hours later, the footage was already viral. The title varied, but the message was the same. Passenger insults black CEO. Seconds later, he's dragged off the plane. Clips spread like wildfire. Millions of views. Hashtags trending. News anchors replayed the moment she spoke those words. I am the chief executive officer of this airline. The internet dissected every detail. The smugness of the aggressor, the hesitation of the crew, the stunned faces of fellow passengers. The aggressor's name leaked within hours. A mid-level executive at a manufacturing firm. Married, children, respectable on paper. But his arrogance, his cruelty, his collapse, all of it immortalized in 4K clarity. Recorded from 5 different angles by passengers who hadn't dared intervene, but hadn't dared to look away either. His company released a statement by morning. We do not tolerate discriminatory behavior. Effective immediately, he is no longer employed with us. His fall was swift and merciless. Meanwhile, the CEO's quiet composure became legend. Late-night hosts marveled at the footage. Commentators praised her restraint. Civil rights leaders hailed it as a public reminder of the prejudice black professionals endure daily, even at the highest levels of power. But in that cabin, before the world caught on, the moment belonged only to those who had lived it. The older attendant approached cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. Madam, I want to apologize. I doubted you. His voice cracked. I should have stood up sooner. She looked at him, her eyes steady. For a beat, she let the silence work on him the way it had worked on the aggressor, heavy, unblinking, unrelenting. Then she spoke, her tone calm but absolute. Learn from it. Next time, do better. The attendant bowed his head. Yes, ma'am. She didn't linger on him. She turned back toward the window, her reflection ghosting against the dark sky outside. To the casual eye, she was merely another passenger watching clouds. But to those who had seen the last hours unfold, she was something else entirely. Power made flesh, dignity made visible. The landing was uneventful, but the disembarkation was unlike any other. Passengers filed past her seat in quiet reverence. Some murmured thanks. Others simply nodded, their eyes filled with admiration they didn't know how to put into words. She acknowledged them only with slight nods, never breaking her calm. She didn't need their validation. The truth had validated itself. By the time her feet touched the jet bridge, her phone was already buzzing with messages from her communications team. The video had exploded. Networks wanted interviews. Investors were sending statements of support. Employees across the airline were flooding internal channels with messages of pride. She ignored the phone for now. She didn't need the world applause. What mattered was what had been demonstrated in that cabin. That arrogance collapses when exposed. That silence can be more powerful than rage. And that even at 30,000 feet, dignity has the power to ground cruelty. Hours later, in the privacy of her office, she reviewed the official incident report. The aggressor had been placed on a federal no-fly list. His removal had been processed swiftly, efficiently. The footage of his screaming exit was now the most watched clip of the week. She set the report aside and looked out her office window at the runways beyond, where planes rose and landed in steady rhythm. Her fleet, her crews, her passengers. Her voice, soft and certain, echoed in her mind. Actions have consequences. For him, the consequences had been humiliation, loss, collapse. For her, the consequence was something different. Vindication. Proof. A reminder to the world that authority doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes, at the exact right moment, it reveals itself with devastating clarity. The internet had already turned her calm gaze into a symbol, but she didn't need symbols. She had reality, and reality had already spoken. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.